So it's nice. It's very nice to have you with us here at the Co-Creators TV, Dr. Campbell, and it's a big honor, really.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Corina. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Would you like to say first a few things about your background so my viewers will start to know about you?
Sure. I'm a physicist, and I've worked for about 40 years before I retired as a professional physicist. At about the same time I started my physics career, I also started a career in studying altered states of consciousness, consciousness research. And I did that with Bob Monroe, a man who wrote the books Journeys Out of Body, Far Journeys, and Ultimate Journey. And Bob Monroe had these experiences where he found himself in another reality system. And he thought he was going crazy. He consulted psychiatrists and so on, and he was afraid of it. But he found that he couldn't not have them. He couldn't stop them. So they just happened, and he began to play with it, to experiment with it. And he found out that it was real. He could get information. He could see things and know things that otherwise he wouldn't be able to know. So he convinced himself with his own experiments that it was real. And he wanted to study it and make it science. So he had built a lab, and he was looking for some scientists. About the time I was in my late 20s, had just gotten out of graduate school about 6 months to a year earlier, and we just made a match. So I spent the next decade really working with Bob Monroe. The deal was that he would teach me how to go out of body, how to explore this other reality system. And I would be, one of his scientists. I would help try to understand it, find out how it worked, why it worked, what the mechanisms were, things it could do, things it couldn't do, and why. So that was sort of the deal that we had. And Bob was a good teacher. So within about a year, I was being able to explore this larger consciousness system on my own whenever I wanted to, just as he did. And then I started doing science. I started doing experiments in that non-physical reality. And you do science in the non-physical reality just like you do science here. You have to have repetition so you can get into exactly the same altered state and go through the exact same process, something that's evidential in the physical reality, sort of like the remote viewing sort of thing, something that you can go back later and check to see whether you were right or not. And then you change one variable and you do it again a lot of times, maybe 10 or 20 times, and then you change another variable and do it again. So eventually you find out what variables make what difference, in the ability to do it. So by very slowly and methodically, I probed the larger conscious system to understand how does it work? What are the constraints? And after about 35 years of that research, I thought I understood how consciousness worked. So I wrote the books, My Big Toe. Really, they were a theory of consciousness. But I knew from my own experiences in the larger conscious system that consciousness was fundamental. Consciousness is the main thing, and that the physical reality was a derivative of that, because I could use my mind to modify things in the physical world. So I knew that mind was more fundamental.
I think you dropped out. Can you still hear me?
2 years after the book.
Okay, now you're back. Okay.
Okay.
It was for a while. I heard where you said that with your mind you could modify things in physical reality.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where you dropped out.
Okay. With my mind, I could modify things in physical reality, which told me that that consciousness was more fundamental and more significant than the physical. Physical was a derivative because it was the mind that modified the physical, not the other way around. So I published my books in 2003, and a couple of years later, I was listening to a gentleman, Ted Wallace. He was talking to me about another subject, and it just triggered something in my mind that made a connection. And I realized that the same principles, the same logic that explained consciousness also explained quantum mechanics. I should have gotten that. I'm a physicist. I understand quantum mechanics, and I should have made that connection earlier, but I didn't. But then I got this aha moment, and there it was, quantum mechanics, and I understood it. And that's a big thing in physics, because physicists don't understand it. Physicists call it weird science. It's not understandable. It's non-local. It does things that don't seem to be logical. It does not follow the normal way that they think the world works. It's obviously not about material things happening. So physicists call it weird science, but as I saw it now from this viewpoint of my theory of consciousness, it wasn't weird anymore. I could see exactly the mechanism of how it worked and why it worked that way. So I started computing answers to quantum mechanics problems, and I could get the answer without doing the math, just by looking at the logic of the problem. So then I thought, well, wow, if I have solved the big problem of how quantum mechanics works, why particles are best represented as probability distributions, then what about the other big thing in physics? What about relativity? But it only took me a few hours thinking about that to realize I had that solution too. You see, relativity is built on the concept, or on the assumption that the speed of light is a constant. There's no reason why it should be a constant. There's nothing else in our reality that has a limitation to how fast it can go, except the speed of light, and nothing can exceed that speed limit. Well, why do we have that speed limit? Well, that's obvious. It's because it's a virtual reality. You see, I found that consciousness is information. Information is what we, if you think about information, everything that we say is our reality is because we get information through our senses. So we have 5 senses. We hear, we see, we smell, we taste, and we feel. And those are our 5 senses, and our reality is made up of data that we collect through our senses. So reality is really just information. Consciousness is an information system. Okay, so if consciousness is an information system, that tells us something important about consciousness, that information systems evolve and grow by lowering their entropy. And that means lower entropy means more order. Okay, high entropy is less order. Entropy is a measure of disorder. So once I understood this idea that consciousness is an information system, well, that's the same as saying consciousness is a virtual reality. It's a computed reality. It's just about information. And science is coming to that conclusion. Physicists all over the planet understand that, because that's what their physics experiments are telling them, that our reality is information-based, not material-based. So, let's see, where was I going with that? So when we have a virtual reality, the virtual realities all have a speed limit, and that is 1 pixel of time, okay, to move through 1 pixel of distance. A virtual reality, a digital virtual reality, it comes in pixels, comes in discrete units of things, you see. So if you go when I say one little delta t, that's a quantum of time, 1 little unit of time, and take that and divide that into 1 little unit of distance, a quantum of distance, you get a speed, you get a velocity. That's the maximum speed anything can move. So it can only move one pixel to distance every time through the cycle, every time cycle, every delta t. So every virtual reality has a speed limit. Even the games we play, if you play The Sims has an upper speed limit. So does World of Warcraft. It depends on how small those pixels are, the delta t and the delta x, the pixels of time and distance, which are set by the resolution of the simulation. If the simulation has a very high resolution, then you have very small delta t's and delta x's, you see, but it's the ratio between them is what the constant velocity is. It's the delta x over delta t. So every virtual reality has a higher speed. So that just says that, okay, this is obviously a virtual reality, and it's doing good physics. It explains quantum mechanics, it explains relativity. And then I started looking for other paradoxes in physics. I wanted to find all of the things that physicists just didn't know how to explain, paradoxes. And I found that I could explain all of them. All of them had a good logical explanation once you saw it from a virtual reality perspective. So things like tunneling, particle tunneling, where particles seem to get outside of energy traps where they shouldn't be able to move through them because they don't have enough energy. Things like the Big Bang. Where did that ball of plasma come from that started the Big Bang? See, it couldn't have come from our reality because our reality didn't exist yet. It had to precede our reality. And in physics, that's just a big paradox. How could that possibly be? Well, in a virtual reality, there's an obvious explanation for that. Our virtual reality is an evolved one. It started with initial conditions and a rule set. And the initial conditions were the ball of plasma. And it started evolving and expanding and cooling when the run button was hit and the delta T started to, progress through the simulation. So that made sense. And just all the rest of them, there are dozens and dozens of these things that physicists just couldn't answer. And this theory, the same theory that explains consciousness, answers all of them. So now I have a set of quantum mechanics experiments out there that would provide very strong evidence for this being a virtual reality and strong evidence for consciousness being the computer. You see, if you have a virtual reality, then it has to be computed someplace. Where does the information come from that describes it? And consciousness is the computer. So I've given you a very quick overview of me, where I come from, and kind of a general overview of the virtual reality concepts. Now, virtual reality, back when I published these books in 2003, was not a popular idea. In fact, myself and maybe 2 other people on the planet thought it was a really good idea, and everybody else thought it was crazy. Didn't seem to make any sense. Now, a decade and a half later, every physics department in any major university in the world has people in it who think that this is a virtual reality. They generally don't call it that. They call it a reality based on information, but those are both the same thing.
Yeah.
The information needs a source. It's a computed reality because creating information is a computational thing. So in any case, that idea has gone from one that's very obscure to one that is probably growing faster in physics than any other concept, the idea that this is a virtual reality. So it's gaining momentum from all sides. And I think we're going to only continue that. So my guess would be in another decade and a half, almost everybody in the physics departments all over the world will think that this is a virtual reality. That'll be kind of a common knowledge thing, which will be an important day for us when we get there. That will be a big day, because what that means is when the physicists decide that this is a virtual reality, that means that the people that we depend on to tell us what's true will tell us that we are a subset. Our physical universe is a subset of something bigger that is non-physical. That's a big statement for scientists to make. So it's almost come full circle now, where physics, philosophy, metaphysics, and theology now all meet and all become part of one thing. There's not this big difference where you have, theology and metaphysics on one end, and opposed to that is science. It's not going to be that way. Science, metaphysics, and theology, psychology, all of these things, biology, they're all going to change dramatically once we have this understanding. Science will be completely redone, re-engineered. Science won't be at all like it used to be. It'll be more powerful. It'll be more productive. It'll make more gadgets. It will be, a much better science, but it will not be estranged from or separate than metaphysics and theology. It'll all come together under one understanding. So that, I think, is a very good thing. Instead of being separate and fighting with each other, we'll see we're all part of the same bigger picture. We just need a bigger picture. And when you got that bigger picture, then there's room for all of those things to coexist, and not only coexist, but you can see how they all are part of that bigger thing.
Yes, yes, it's wonderful. It's very hopeful.
Yes.
Yes. I would like to ask you something. I used to be, for many, many years, a gamer. I liked all these fairy tale environments, World of Warcraft, have played the Lineage, Guild Wars, you know. It was a very fairy tale thing for me. And I used to feel that what I experienced, like a user, like a player, seeing the game, I thought I'm crazy, because sometimes I was feeling that I am in a virtual reality and that maybe I am already in a screen and someone sees me. And, you know, so your theory resonates very much with my experiences. But in these recent years, I turned the medical thing, as a medical doctor, I turned mostly to reality creation. I think I saw that I can help more the people with reality creation when we do subconscious reprogramming and change the reality in order to get healed or in order to have a better life. And I find in your theory something that I understand it perfectly, because I used to be a player, a gamer, and I know that every virtual reality has to have time. Okay, so I understand this, but it's not convenient for me, I must say. Why? Because my theory on the manifestation coaching that I'm doing is based on two principles, and I want to ask you how you see these principles. So I have written them here. The one principle is that there are infinite parallel realities and infinite versions of ourselves. The other principle is that our desired parallel reality already exists. And, you know, thinking that our desired reality already exists makes things easier for manifestation, because it seems more possible to our brains. But in order our desired reality to already exist means that there is an infinite now, and all possible realities are packed at this infinite now. So your theory removes the infinite now, right? And if we have a linear time, then we can't think anymore that my desired reality already exists.
Right. What you're describing is a theory that physicists call the many worlds theory, and that's that every time somebody makes a choice, a new universe is split off that then has that as a separate reality. So if I decide to scratch my head with my right hand instead of my left hand, we got a whole new universe where I scratch my head with one hand instead of the other. So eventually you have a universe where everything that could possibly happen has happened. And what you're thinking of is then you just find that one that is the one that you'd rather be in, and you kind of manifest that, or you're maybe moving yourself into that reality rather than this one that doesn't have in it what you want. Well, that many worlds theory was generated by physicists trying to maintain their belief in materialism, because that way they could keep materialism as a belief, because then all these physical universes were still physical universes. We weren't doing anything other than physical universes, but there had to be, yes, an infinite number of them, because every time an electron flipped its spin, you had to have a whole new universe. One where it flipped that spin and one where it didn't. So anytime anything happened, you need another whole universe, so that you have as many universes as there are possibilities for things to happen. So as you see, that would cause this huge number of universes, of physical universes that you would need, where all these changes take place, with all the various people in them and all the variations. It's so immense that even though it's theoretically possible, it just isn't practical. The resources required to generate a nearly infinite. It's not really infinite. Infinite doesn't really exist. Infinite is just a metaphor. We can approach infinity, but you can never get to something that's infinite. But this huge, huge number of universes is just very wasteful as far as resources go. It's not a parsimonious way to run a simulation. So it's very impractical. The probability that that actually exists is extremely small, because it's not a reasonable way to go about doing things. But you can have the exact same result, if you will, done a different way. Instead of doing it in a very large number of physical universes, it's done with probability. You see, we have choices as individuated units of consciousness. We have choices, and we have lots of choices, and we will make one of those choices, and we have some probability to make any one of those choices. So we have a system of probability that will say, here are all the things that we could have done and the probability that we might have done them. And that's like the past probable universe. So now you see it contains all the data in it that would have been in these multiple virtual realities, but we don't have to have, you know, trillions of trillions of trillions of trillions of universes. All we need is probability in a computer. So we've taken something that's massive and very hard to implement and turned it into something that is very easy to implement. Now it's just a matter of, you know, filing data on a hard drive, not making whole new universes. So it's just a better solution, but it has all the same things in it. So here you are, you have choices to make, and you make a choice with your free will that, you know, one of those choices. Let's say you have something that has 10 choices, and you pick choice number 3, and that's what you do. Okay, then that's your reality. Time flows, and your reality is that. You could have made these other choices, but you didn't. So all the ones you didn't make are just probable, just possible. They're potential choices. But in the future, let's say you could make one of 10 choices in the future, and all of those are possible, and we give those a probability. Okay, so in your future, you will have choices, and those choices have a probability of likelihood of you making that. You can change the probable future with your intent. That's what gives you a connection to modify your reality. Because with your intent, with your mind, you can modify the probability of what's going to happen next. And that's set up in this virtual reality as a feedback mechanism to give us who are in this reality some feedback on the quality of our choices. So it works out the same way as far as you modifying your reality. There's several ways you modify your reality. One of them is by the way you interpret the data you get. In a virtual reality, you get a data stream and you interpret it to be the reality. The reality only exists in the minds of the players. That's in the consciousness. So all of the possible things with all the various people and all the various ideas and interests and ways that they think will modify that future probability into be something that then realizes itself. So we all have free will, we all make choices, and we create our own reality with our intent. So see, that gets you to the same place. You can create your reality. You can manifest your reality, but what you're doing is modifying future probability. You modify yourself, you interpret things differently. You know, your behavior also changes your future probability. So there's several ways that we can modify what's happening, what's coming, but we can't modify everything to be the way we want it. There are limitations. And the limitations are, this is a multiplayer game. We can't modify the free will choices that other people are making, only our own. We have to deal with the things that other people do. And we can only move that probability in the future probable database a certain amount. We can influence it, we can modify it, but we don't control it. So let's say if something in the future was 1,000,000 to 1 to happen, and we're really powerful people, we may make that all the way down to 1,001. So we've changed it 3 orders of magnitude. Well, we're really powerful. That's a lot of change, but it's still not likely to happen because now it's 1,000 to 1, and that's just not likely to come up. The way things are depends. What we can change depends on how much change is required. Can it work easily, or can it work not easily? So we look at the uncertainty around things. So within the uncertainty around any event, we can modify that future probability within that uncertainty. So that's the way the system works. Accomplish is the same sort of thing, but now you have a system that's easily computed. It doesn't require infinite resources. It doesn't require infinite energy. It doesn't require infinite universes to be created. It just requires a database, a couple of databases. So you have the future probable database, and then you have the historical database of all the things that could have happened and the probability that they would have happened. And then it's the things we actually did with our free will. That's a thread that runs through that past database. So you get to a similar capability, but it's a much more logical and more reasonable way of getting there if you have to figure out how does it work? What's the mechanism behind it all? The other thing is that if you have the many worlds theory, where there's all these different universes, that basically takes away free will. There's no longer any free will. We don't have free will in that. Everything that could possibly happen happens, and you have all these universes, but you really don't have choice. You just have an array of all the possibilities with no free will, and that's a problem. Now, you solved that by saying, well, we'll jump from one universe to the other. We'll jump from one universe to some other universe, and that's a choice. But of course, science in the physics of many worlds, it doesn't allow that. So,
yes, the way I explain it is like if you have a big YouTube and with a lot of videos, and every video is that parallel reality. And when you choose play, is where you choose your consciousness to focus to that reality or to that reality, That's how I had it in my mind.
Yeah. Well, you can still get to the same explanation of things. You just now have to use, well, I shouldn't say you have to, but if you do it from my viewpoint, you just have to change your metaphors, the way you explain it. But it is, it does work that way. And maybe I should, for the listeners, I should say something to make what I just said a little more sense. And that is, I want to explain virtual reality just a little bit so that people get an idea of who we are.
Yes.
And okay, we are the players in this virtual reality. We're consciousness. We're not the bodies. So think about a virtual reality as you have a player and you have an avatar. Okay, in World of Warcraft, the avatar, say, is an elf or a barbarian or a wizard or something, and the consciousness is the player. Okay, the player makes all the decisions for the avatar. The avatar doesn't do anything. The avatar is just a picture on a screen. It doesn't have, it doesn't have internal organs. It doesn't have a brain. It doesn't make choices. It's not conscious. It's just a picture on a screen. The player is the consciousness for the avatar. All right, so now let's look at World of Warcraft. In World of Warcraft, the computer that computes World of Warcraft can't be inside the World of Warcraft reality frame. So you're not going to the elf isn't going to walk around and say, oh, there's the computer that's computing us. You see, that won't happen, because the computer has to be outside of the thing that it computes, of the virtual reality. So that means that from the elf's point of view, the computer must be non-physical, because from the elf's point of view, it's his World of Warcraft reality, his World of Warcraft map is what's physical, because he has to interact with those rivers and streams and trees, and he has to open doors by twisting the doorknob. He has to do all that stuff. So that's his physical world, is the World of Warcraft map. The computer has to be outside of that. Therefore, it's non-physical to the elf. Now, the player, the consciousness of that elf, the player, also has to be non-physical, because the player is basically in a communication with the computer. So the player and the computer are talking to each other. And to have that communication back and forth, you need to be in the same reality frame. You don't communicate back and forth that way across reality frames. Okay, so the computer is non-physical. The player has to be non-physical. And another reason you'd say that the player has to be non-physical is because the elf is just pixels lit up on a screen. It can't be conscious. It's just a picture of to show the player what's going on. So that's all it is. So the elf itself can't be conscious. Its decision-making has to come from something non-physical. So what we have then is that we have a virtual reality, and the players in that virtual reality are the consciousness of the characters, okay? So what are we? Okay, who am I? What am I? Well, I'm consciousness because I'm talking, I'm making decisions, I'm making choices, and my body is my avatar. Okay, and you mentioned in your own experience where you logged on and you started to identify with your avatar. Well, the thing that keeps us from identifying with our elf is that we know that we're in a separate reality because we can get up and have a snack. We can put the computer on pause and you know, go to the bathroom. We live in a different reality than the elf. But in this game, the way it works is that a piece of this individuated unit of consciousness logs on with no memory, just with the quality that it has earned in its evolution. So the quality of that consciousness it takes with it, but that's all it takes. It doesn't take any memory, and it is a 100% immersion with that avatar. So that consciousness, I call that a free will awareness unit. It's a subset of an individuated unit of consciousness. That free will awareness unit doesn't have any awareness of any other reality other than the one with that avatar. So that free will awareness unit, that piece of consciousness, identifies as the avatar. It thinks it is the avatar because it's consciousness. It doesn't have to take a break to get something to eat or go to the bathroom. It's just consciousness, you see. So it really believes that it is the avatar because that's the only experience it has is the experience of its avatar. So so that's the way that works. So that's why we believe that we are these bodies. But when you learn to get around in that larger consciousness system, and you can see kind of the machine behind the curtain, you know, like you go back behind the stage, you know, and look at all the props and things and the stuff, you know, the smoke machines and the lights and everything that they have back behind the screens in a play. Suddenly, all the clever stuff they're doing, you can understand it. Oh, I see where that came from. That really wasn't the sun shining. That was that big light over there that just was made to look like the sun shining. And suddenly everything makes sense. Well, that's the way it is when you get out of this reality and explore the reality of consciousness, because you are consciousness. That's what you are. So
when you did exploration, you could see that? Because I know you explored in other realities. Could you say behind the curtain?
Yeah, that's it. When you get out of this reality into the reality of consciousness, you can see behind the curtain. You can go with people you can be with an avatar that dies and follow along with them as to where they go. What's the process of that? So you can follow that process along, and then you can get into the virtual reality that is what I call the transition reality. It's another virtual reality. Every reality in which we have experience is a virtual reality. Our experience is defined by by rules. If there are no rules, there's no experience. You need to have a rule to define context. You know, and without context, there is no reality. So the only thing that's fundamental is consciousness itself. But every virtual reality, including our own, is a subset, you know, of consciousness. But everything, like when you die, you go into a different virtual reality. When I explore the larger conscious system, I found all sorts of virtual realities. There were lots of virtual realities that, like, oh, look, here's The Sims, and there's the World of Warcraft, And over here is, some other virtual reality. This is No Man's Sky over here. So all those various virtual realities are all subsets running in consciousness. And they all have a piece of the larger conscious system that's working as a computer, and another piece of the larger conscious system that is us. We're pieces of the larger consciousness system. Our individuated unit of consciousness is just a piece of that larger consciousness system. So now there's one more thing to say that I guess will round out the picture, and that is that...
No, because I have questions exactly on that thing that you say, so it's great.
Yeah, and that is that, okay, this larger consciousness system, like any information system, has to evolve. It needs to change in order to live. Think of it this way. If you had an information system that was nothing but random bits, now a bit's just the smallest piece of information. So if all of its bits were random, there'd be no information. Randomness doesn't have information. Matter of fact, that's kind of how you define randomness. It's the lack of any order. It's the lack of any information. So the way a information system evolves is to create order, to create information. Once you have order, that defines information. You have patterns and patterns of patterns. Okay, eventually these systems evolve to have time, regular time. It always had some sort of primordial time, but regular time is nifty because that allows sequences of patterns. So all of these ways of building structure, of organization, patterns is an organization, sequences is organization in time. You see, so that's how the larger conscious system evolves toward lower entropy states. Lower entropy means more order. High entropy is a measure of disorder. So high entropy is a lot of disorder, not much information. Low entropy, more information, it's a measure of order. So any information system, whether it's the information in your computer or the information in the larger conscious system, any information system evolves, grows, becomes more by increasing order and decreasing disorder, decreasing randomness. So we have this system, and it was a monolithic system. In other words, there was just this one big consciousness, and it had to evolve by constructing and building and making order, and its evolution started to slow down. There was only so much that it could think of what to do, of how it could order its bits. So it started to slow down its evolution, and it needed a new thing to do that would give it more potential, more differences, more novelty that it could explore, that it could build with. And the way it did that was it would break pieces of itself off, give those pieces free will, just like it had. And now you had two things with free will, two pieces of consciousness with free will, and they had to interact with each other. The potential of that, the possibilities of that are huge. And then you have lots of those things. So now you have thousands and tens of thousands and millions of these chunks of consciousness that can all interact with each other in a zillion ways. So the possibilities of what you can create out of that are now enormous, and the evolution started to pick up again because there was now a lot more potential in the system because of this. But what you have now is a social system. You see, consciousness just communicates. That's what it does. It has free will and it communicates. Well, think of that as like a big chat room. There were all these individuated unit of consciousness now with free will communicating with each other, but that was it, because that's the only rules they had in this virtual reality was the communication protocols. There weren't any other rules. Well, there's not a lot of traction there for growing up, for making better decisions. What they needed was more rules, something that had feedback, something that had consequences, so that if they made a choice, that choice mattered. That choice affected others, and others' choices affected them. So that's why the consciousness system decided to make a virtual reality. A virtual reality is just a rule set. It's a set of rules in which consciousness can interact with each other. Okay? And it made this virtual reality by starting with a set of initial conditions, which is our ball of plasma, high temperatures, high pressure, at a small point, and then you hit the run button and that stuff expands and moves and interacts according to its rule set. Okay? And that rule set then is our science. Our science digs out little chunks of this rule set and that's a fact. That's our rule set. That's how this place works. So
gravity, etc.
Yeah, all that stuff, it's all part of the rule set, right? So now we have this social system of consciousness, and the system is trying to optimize itself and lower its entropy as much as possible. Well, the way for it to do that, the only way for it to do that, is through cooperation and caring about each other. All of the individuated units of consciousness, if they cooperate, and they cooperate because they care about the whole, then you can optimize it. If they are all self-centered, then everybody's for himself, that de-optimizes it. And I can give a little thing to maybe make that more credible.
Yeah.
If you had a bunch of individuals, okay, and you had, let's say, 10,000 individuals, and you gave them a space to live in and a certain number of resources, and you say they're going to make decisions based on caring and cooperation, and then you have an identical 10,000 individuals, and they have the identical resources, and they're going to make decisions based on fear, self-centeredness. Okay, so we got the love group, it's about caring and cooperation. We got the fear group. Okay, let's just see how those two groups will fare. And those are the two fundamental groups. You could call that good and evil if you wanted to, but we'll just call that love and fear. So in the love group, if anybody makes a discovery or finds something out or comes up with an invention, they'll immediately share it because then everybody can use it. And if somebody's barn burns down, everybody else comes and helps them rebuild it. They're all trying to help everybody else have as much free will and as much choice as they want. Everybody tries to optimize for everybody else. Okay, so let's say this goes on for a certain number of years, 100 years or something, we let that go. Now, what about over here on the fear group? Because you have fear, you don't have trust. If you have fear, then you can't trust anybody because they may stab you in the back and take your stuff. So if it's fear, then fear is all self-centered. It's about you. So in that group, everybody grabs as much as they can of those resources and then tries to hold on to them. Well, they have trouble holding on to them because some other person comes that's bigger than they are, takes it away from them. So the only thing they can do is group up. They can get, well, let's get 4 or 5 of us together and we'll all defend each other, mutual defense pacts. And now if somebody can't take it away from us, and we can take it away from the ones and twosies because now 10 of us are bigger than they are. Well, then everybody else groups up too. And then the groups get bigger. And the groups are very hierarchical because there's no trust. So you have all this hierarchy in the group because everybody wants to control everything. So the control, the power and control then runs down through this steep hierarchy. Well, what happens in the fear group is that after 100 years or whatever the time limit is, just 5% of the entities there own 95% of all the resources, and everybody else is a peasant. There's constant struggling for position and undermining, stabbing each other in the back. Everybody wants to work their way up in the hierarchy, and they do that at the expense of everybody else. So that's the kind of life you have. Sounds a whole lot like our life here on this planet, doesn't it? Yeah, that's the way we live. Okay, we're the fear group. And then you have the love group over here. What have they done in 100 years with their resources? Well, they've optimized it. Everybody has maximum free will because anybody says, I'm not happy, I don't like doing what I'm doing. Everybody else tries to fix that for them. Oh, what would you rather do? Can't we fix that so you can do that? Sure we can, you see? So everybody's trying to fix it for everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody cares about the other person. It's not about them. So in this love group, you have maximum free will, maximum choice. If you don't like your job, all you have to do is say so, and you will get another job. If you say, I don't like working in a factory, I'd rather write poetry. All right, well, poetry's a good thing. We like that. So Well, just arrange for you to write poetry. That would be fine. So you have lots of free will there and lots of choices, because if you're not happy and you're not contributing because you're not doing what you want to do, then that's not optimal. It's optimal when everybody is engaged and happy and giving it, their best because they're doing what they want to do. So that's the way it works. So you see, one of them, the love group, is the natural low entropy solution to a social system. So now we have consciousness. It's a social system. It's a virtual reality. It's a computed system. What does it do? Well, its mission, its thing, is to lower its entropy, more order, to grow up. If it does the opposite, that's its evolution. If it de-evolves, that means higher entropy. Okay, and we take that then to the interaction of the individuals. If the individuals care about each other and cooperate, and it's not about them, it's about everybody else, then you optimize that. That's how you lower entropy. That's how you build and construct and rearrange things in the most optimal way. On the other side, the fear side, that's how that fear side is not sustainable. It doesn't work. Somebody else builds up something good, everybody else is envious and wants to take it away from them. So whoever's on the top of the hill won't last there very long. Somebody's going to bump them off and want to take over, because everybody's lusting after that power and control so that they can get more and more of the stuff and protect it better. So that's the difference. So what does the larger conscious system do? It creates a virtual reality like ours. Okay, and it creates this universe. Eventually we get this planet Earth, and we get it, in our solar system, and entities start to evolve. And when they evolve to the point that they have good choices, now the computer's playing all the entities now in this evolutionary process of our universe, and it's playing all the characters. But when the characters evolve to the point that they're making interesting choices, individuated units of consciousness start logging on to play those characters, because now their choices matter. The things they do have consequences. If they make poor choices, they end up miserable. They end up in a happy place. They end up like we end up here, with all this greed and violence, and everybody wants more power and more control. They end up like that if they make bad choices. If they make good choices, life is happy, it's good, they're learning, they're growing, and they get that for the positive choices. So it's like the carrot and the stick. You do it, play the game good, you get the carrot. You play it poorly, you get the stick. So that's the virtual reality. And this is an entropy reduction trainer for individuated units of consciousness. That's what this reality is. And we have a mission. We have a point to being here, a purpose. And that is to increase the quality of our consciousness. In other words, to evolve our consciousness. You might say spiritual growth. Or you could just say that we are here to, evolve our consciousness, not de-evolve our consciousness. So this virtual reality now is the fast track. It's where entities go to make meaningful, important choices that help them evolve more quickly, rather than just being in a big chat room. So that then comes kind of full circle, and it shows us why we're here, why this virtual reality exists. It's a tool of consciousness to help us evolve more effectively. And now we know what our mission is here. What's our purpose? It's to be kind. It's to be caring. It's to care about other people. That's what we're here for. And as we grow up, our life gets happier, full of joy, even amidst all this greed and everything else. It doesn't matter. We're still happy. We're still making choices that are good. And we have a joyful life. And on the other side, if we're fearful and we make poor choices that are self-centered, we're miserable, we're unhappy, we struggle, we have anger, we have all the negative things. So that's where we are. That's who we are. It's how we get here, why this reality exists. And it is a probabilistic reality. It's the statistical-based reality. The rule set itself is largely deterministic, but it has a lot of randomness in it as well. So it's deterministic with a bunch of random choices. But the play in between characters, the interaction, what's going on, is all statistically done doing that deterministically doesn't make any sense. It's a very poor way to run a simulation. So in any case, that's now the big overview of what's going on here.
Okay. One question on that, the last thing. The large conscious system is like a trainer for us, right? And a trainee, because it evolves too, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see happening what you say, that if you are loving and caring, you get a pleasant life from the system, from the large conscious system. And if you are not caring and you are self-centered, it takes you with the rod. I see the opposite happening. Why? And I say not only from myself as an example, but from more people. The people who, even this phenomenon is so big that in Greece we have a saying for that every good person has a bad fate. And you see that happening. What is going on? I mean,
okay, that's because you're looking at a different thing. You're looking at success as a material success, but that's not the success I'm talking about. Success is in growing up positively. Okay, I think I'll get your answer here. Success is growing up. Success is making good choices. Okay, and it's getting rid of your fear. You don't have to do something special to become love. All you have to do is get rid of the fear. So if you get rid of the fear, that gets rid of the ego, because ego is a part of the fear, and it gets rid of the beliefs, because beliefs are part of the fear. Without the fear, without the ego and beliefs, you can live in any kind of situation and be happy. You can prosper in any sort of situation. It's not about the stuff. It's about the quality of your life. It's not even about your life, because one life just follows another. It follows another. You see, once this life is done, you pick up another avatar later on. So you're happy because you're helping, you're doing the right thing. That's what makes you happy. So it's not so much that when you do the right thing and try to help people, that other people will take advantage of you. Well, that's really not the case. You're not stupid. Just because you're fearless doesn't mean you're stupid. You will do things in a way to protect yourself, to, take care of your own business, your own responsibilities. Being fearless doesn't mean you'll jump off a cliff. That's being stupid, not fearless. So you have to be aware of what's going on, aware of how you interact with other people. You have to be aware of the motivations of those other people, and you try to take yourself out of harm's way. You try to be in places where things work, and you can do that. But you see, if you don't have the fear and you don't have the ego and belief, you're almost always happy and enjoy, because things don't upset you. When you're upset, that's because things aren't the way you want them. Yes. Oh, that's not the way I want it. I wanted that promotion and I didn't get it. I wanted this, I wanted that, and I didn't get it. Well, that's ego. That's the fear. That's the fear-based stuff. It's only the fear-based stuff that makes you unhappy. If you're in a if you're in a situation and the situation is kind of ugly and isn't pleasant, well, and that situation kind of pushes you away, well, that's good. You don't want to be there anyway. You don't want to be a part of that. Go on and do something else that works better for you. Yeah. So without the ego and without the belief, you're a happy person all the time. You've got no buttons. Nothing really upsets you. You can see, okay, here's an ugly person and they just stole money out of my wallet. Okay, instead of getting angry and upset, you learn something. You say, well, I'm not going to leave my wallet where they can get it anymore. I'm going to keep that wallet, out of sight. I'm going to keep it locked up. I'll keep it in my pocket with a zipper on it, and I won't just have it around, allow that to happen anymore. So you learn from all of your experiences rather than get upset and angry about them. You figure education is expensive, and things happen to you. You just, you make sure that doesn't happen anymore, rather than getting in a big rage about how unfair it was that they took your money. Yeah. You just say, well, okay, now what can I do about that? Can I get the money back? No, that person ran away and I'll never find them. And so I'll just learn something. I won't let that happen again. And if every time I go to this place, somebody does something that nice to me, well, I'll stop going to that place. I won't do that. You see, so within your life, you can find something very profitable to do, a way to earn a living, a way to live that you can live with integrity. You can live with your caring. You can live with your love. It doesn't mean you're foolish. It means you have to take care of yourself, yes, but you don't do it from a self-centered perspective. It's not all about me, mine first, and trying to manipulate everybody else to be the way you want them. So the only way you're unhappy is when you don't get, when you don't get what you want. And if you don't have any wants, that never happens. So, so you're happy.
Yeah. So no ego means no desires.
It means no desires as far as I desire other people to be this way. I desire my boss to be that way. I want my spouse to be this way. All these things that you have about somebody else, those kinds of desires, yes. It means you let all of that go. You realize people just are who they are.
You have to be happy by yourself, and
Yes, you have to be happy with yourself. You have to be authentic, who you really are. You can't be acting your life. You have to be it. You have to live it. And you have to realize that you can only change yourself, and you accept that other people are whoever they are. They are just the way they are, and you have to interact with them perhaps, but you don't have to let them take advantage of you. You don't have to let them do that. You can, defend yourself. You can keep that from happening. This is not a pacifist philosophy. You can fight back in this philosophy. You don't have to always turn the other cheek. Sometimes turning the other cheek is the right thing to do, probably most of the time, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you need to fight back. It's all, what's good and what's bad is determined by what is a low entropy choice, what is going to lower the entropy for the system, and what is going to raise the entropy in the system. All the things that lower the entropy in the system is how we define good. And all those things that would raise entropy in the system we define as bad. So you just make your choices that are low entropy choices, and everything works out fine.
Lower the entropy sounds like more love, right?
Yeah.
So what would make the entropy go lower? Sounds like that questions what love would do now.
Yes, right.
Yes?
Yes, the low entropy choice is the choice that's based on love. Right. That's exactly right. So these things you see bad things happening to people. Well, they're only bad from a fearful perspective. The fearful perspective is all right, they were nice people. They invited people into their house to give them something to eat. And while those people were in there, they took advantage of them and stole stuff, in their house. Well, if that happens to you, then you learn a lesson. You don't just invite anybody into your house. You maybe invite people or if you want to help other people outside, you take your food and you put it outside on the porch and let people eat it there. You don't necessarily invite them in. So you learn from things that aren't nice, and so that they don't happen anymore. But you don't get angry. You're not upset. You don't say, "Oh, those people, they're awful people," and so on. And just, when you get into that complaining and whining and fussing, and you're unhappy because other people,
attract more of that, then, right?
Yeah, exactly. You attract more of that because again, your intent creates reality. Well, it helps create it. It doesn't make it that way, but it's a pressure toward reality to be the way you want it. So if you're fearful and you're scared, you're going to create what you fear, because that's where your mind energy is. Your mind energy is on fearful negative stuff. Well, you're going to create fearful negative stuff. You're going to raise the probability that your life is going to be full of fearful negativity. But if you're happy and full of peace and goodwill, then what you create around you is peace and goodwill and happiness. And it just changes your life completely.
Yes. I don't know if we have time for one more question or...
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Yes.
We're doing pretty good. Yeah, I'll just put this other thing off that I got to do.
Okay, thank you. So I want to share with you a case of one of my patients and what happened and how it was a miraculous treatment that happened in a very strange way. And maybe you can explain that to me. Also, this explanation of this case couldn't go together with that materialistic
I don't know if you can
view
hear me
going.
or not, but your video
Yes?
has frozen.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing.
I'll wait a bit until we have this back. You hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I do now.
Okay?
I do now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to share with you a case of one of my patients that we had a miraculous treatment with just one session. And the explanation on this situation, I think, goes totally opposite with that materialistic point of view of infinite universes. Because here I used the linear time. So what happened was that it was a young girl, around 18 years old, and she had every day at the same time, every day at 6:30 afternoon, she had big pains at her belly, and this thing created to her half an hour before, at 6 time in the afternoon, to have panic attacks, because she knew that at 6:30 is going to come the other symptom. So she started to have panic attacks from 6 o'clock. I checked her first at the bioresonance machine, and I found that she has a virus, which is called the KISS virus, as we say it. Also, let me, I forget right now the word, but it will come to me. So this virus was making the symptoms, but she didn't want to take homeopathy remedies. So I was trying to figure out what to do, and I haven't decided yet. So she calls me and she says, I am in a panic attack and alone at home, please help me. So I start to relax her and to theta waves, to theta waves. So we entered in a kind of meditation. And the way it was going, I figured out that I can do to her quantum hypnosis. Is a name that I gave to that kind of hypnosis, because what I do is I go to the past and change the past, and the person comes out from the session changed in the future. Yeah. So but I use for that, and that's a part that I want to ask, I use for that higher self, connection with her higher self. Okay, so it's on this case I have actually two questions, but you're gonna see. So I connect her first with her higher self. I saw that she's doing great, so I took this hypnosis thing farther away. We do the connection with her higher self, and I tell her to ask her higher self, where is the root of this situation of hers, when this happened. So he shows to her an image from a memory that she thought she didn't have anymore. She couldn't, she was not reminding this memory. But when he showed to her the image, she said, oh, this, yes, happened in the past, you know. So she says, I am now at a memory where I was a very little girl at the school, and at that day, all the kids drank from the same bottle of water. So this virus, you know, is exactly a virus that you can take from the same glass of water or something. So what I told her was to go to that point before she takes the bottle of water at her hand and to say to her past self, please don't drink from that, because you are going to have problems if you drink from that. So she said to her past self, and the past self just passed the bottle at the other person. When we finished this session and I checked her at the bioresonance machine, the virus was not anymore there. And also before that, she had another symptom. When she was going to the cinema, she had to wear a mask because she was so scared of microbes, and she didn't know why. But her subconscious knew that she has to avoid microbes because she took that virus from that bottle of water, you know. So all this goes together perfectly. And my question is, what happens really works this with higher self? Why is he our 100% of consciousness, and is he our player somehow? And do we really have access in the past and we change the future? I mean, the way I explain this case and this treatment, is it the right way?
Okay.
How you explain it?
Okay, the way I would explain that is that, of course, we do have all that information. Yes, we have the future problem, we have the past database, all of those things that happened. So when she went back to the past, she could see just, where that came from. And what she got that day was something that she drank, and she probably found out, they probably discovered, because all the kids probably got sick at the same time, and they probably figured out it was from the water, and that instilled a fear in her. And she had this fear in her mind about microbes and things that you could get from other people or by sharing this thing. And she was probably a person who had a lot of trouble letting go of her fears. She was probably a person who had lots of fears, lots of things in her life that frightened her. And fears tend to get worse when you stuff them under the rug, when you push them away. So you don't want to deal with that fear because it interferes with your life. So you push it to where you can't see it anymore. But when you do that, it just festers there. It just grows and becomes more and more powerful, I guess, with time. It just sits there and grows because you're not dealing with it. You've just stuck it away. So that fear then gets fed with other fears. When she gets frightened of other kinds of things in her life, it kind of adds to that fear. And then pretty soon, here she is, 18 years old or whatever, and she gets these cramps in her stomach. And that is just a response to that fear. Fear can do things to your physical body. The consciousness leads, the body follows. So the consciousness now has this fear in it. The consciousness is in fear. So the consciousness is the thing that has fear. The avatar is just a picture, a pretty picture on the, on the screen, so to speak. So this fear starts to collect and grow with other fears until it starts making her ill. And she doesn't know why she's ill, but she gets ill very regularly. And that's the regularness of it. Has to do with her own intent, her own mind, and her own consciousness. So when you work with her and you put her in that state, and the thing is, the fear herself, because she had that problem with the pain in her stomach, that caused more fear. So now she had fear that was created by the fear. So you see fear creating more fear.
Oh, fear. Yeah.
So that's why she had the panic attacks, So then she had that fear. And then she had the fear of the panic attacks, which were because of the fear of the pain, which was because of the fear, of the unknown, really, the fear of the getting something from somebody else, the fear that the unknown will get you one day, just like it did her when she was a little girl. She, the viruses and things were all unknown to her, but the unknown, got her with that thing. So all this fear is piling up, and she doesn't know why or where it comes from, which makes her feel helpless. I can't do anything about it. It's just this thing. I'm like I'm in the something evil or something bad has a hold of me, and there's nothing I can do. It's outside of my will, and that frightens her. So no control frightens her. So you got all this fear going on, and now you talk to her and you get her to relax. You get her in a theta state, and then you get her in touch with her higher self. Well, your higher self is really just your individuated unit of consciousness. Remember, you're this free will awareness unit that's just a subset of your individuated unit of consciousness. So you get her in touch with that, and that makes her feel like she is now getting in touch with something bigger and more powerful than she is. She's going up a level, if you will. Okay? So now there's some chance of getting relief here, some chance of something happening. She's going to a higher power kind of thing in her mind. And she goes back because she's got the database there in consciousness. She sees what started the fear was. She was a little girl, and she sees that fear is the origin of all the rest of this fear that's been fear building on fear building and fear. And it all comes from that one thing. And then she goes, oh, is that all? This whole thing is just that's all? And as soon as she finds out that the fear is just this paper tiger. It's not some evil being, you know, that's taking over her body or any of the rest of the scary stuff she was maybe worried about. Then poof, it all just disappears. It collapses. It's just not there anymore. That allows her.
And the virus?
Yeah, there really wasn't a virus. There was a virus then in the beginning. There was a virus in the bottle when she got sick. But these things that she had that were giving her the pains was just her fear. Her fear were giving her the pains. There really wasn't a virus there doing that.
But at the machine, at the bioresonance machine, that I found the virus before the theta healing, before the hypnosis, and the virus was not there anymore after the hypnosis.
Well, that's possible too. They may have, you know, finding a virus is kind of tricky, right? Viruses are really small, and finding a virus, I'm not sure how they found that, but viruses, where they find it in her stomach fluids or in something else?
Yes, they have found it, but with the bioresonance machine is different, because you have something like a pen, and this under the circle at that machine, and you take from acupuncture point, you know, acupuncture points. So it check it at cellular level with this machine. So it's pretty much
okay. That's okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's say there was this virus there, but the virus is there because of her fear. In other words, you create that condition. So the virus is part. So this is a virtual reality. So when you make a measurement, you get a result. Right? It's all data in a data stream. So if somebody's got this bellyache, then there needs to be a physical cause. So there's a virus. A virus is just more data in the data stream. So that's just part of the thing. Now, whether that virus was actually what was making her ill or not, hard to say. She had this virus, but it was just an assumption that that virus was what was making her ill. But they looked for virus and they found some virus, and they assumed that that was what was making her ill. But that was their measurement. And they got a result that made sense to them, okay? And that's just data. So the system puts the virus in there just as perhaps data for them, or maybe it was just beside the point. Maybe it was just a virus that was there that really didn't have anything to do with it. But the point was, it was her fear that was the real cause behind it. So the mind leads, the body follows. So the mind causes the pain because of the fear, but the body will follow that. The body will adjust itself to create the conditions for the pain. You see, the body will adjust itself to give the mind what the mind needs, because the mind leads. So if a virus was then what the body needed to build a reason or an excuse, you know, for the pain, then the body would do that. But the thing was created by mind to begin with. And when the mind let go of it, then the virus just disappeared or wasn't important anymore, or went away. There was no need for it anymore. It's like people who have a lot of self-centeredness and a lot of fear, and they feel inadequate. This is a typical kind of thing in our culture where people feel this way. When they feel that way, that stress of those constantly feeling inadequate will lower their serotonin. And if they do that a lot, then they will have this chronically low serotonin, and they will be diagnosed with low serotonin and be given something like Prozac or one of those kinds of drugs that helps raise the serotonin level. And they will say that, well, you've got this physiological problem. Your biochemistry just doesn't produce enough serotonin. Well, that's an effect. It's their fear is what's creating the problem, you see. It's the fear that creates the low serotonin. And you can take a pill that will boost the serotonin and you'll feel better, but you've treating a symptom. You haven't treated the cause. You see, the cause is the fear. If you could treat the cause, then the symptom would go away, but you can treat the symptom if you like. So the body will modify itself to produce what it needs to produce to support what the consciousness is doing. That's just the way it is. So people who are very negative in life, very full of self-pity and unhappy, they have a lot of physical problems. they have a lot of issues. All kinds of things go wrong in their body. That's because they have a lot of negativity in their body.
Yeah.
And that negativity, then the body changes to support that negativity, if you will, and that's an ill body that supports that. People who are very positive and up and don't have much fear, they tend to be healthy and they don't catch colds very often. You know, everybody else gets the flu, but they don't get it because they don't have a sense that they will get it. In their mind, they're invulnerable. They're not going to get the flu, you know, and if they do, they'll get over it. They just don't see a big deal there. They're not afraid of it. So the body follows. So that's why they found the virus there, because the body produces the stuff that is needed to justify what the mind does in the physical, you know, in the physical reality.
Okay.
That's why it worked that way. So once you solved the fear problem for her, and she saw that it was just this thing, that gave her something to hang it on. That gave her something to attribute the fear to her besides her own inadequacy, which she has all this fear about. So suddenly, oh, it's not me. It's not that I'm inadequate. And it was just this thing that happened to me when I was a little child. Oh, you know, I was thinking it was me, that I'm faulty, I'm defective, I have all these problems, I'm so miserable, my life doesn't work well, and just this general negativity is what makes you ill. And now she had something else that she could hang that on instead of her own inadequacy, and poof, it goes away instantly. She's done. All right, I see it now. I'm not worried about that. That fear disappears, and when the fear disappears, all the symptoms disappear with it. So the mind leads, the body follows. Yeah. Consciousness is fundamental. The physical is not. The physical is an attribute, is a creation of the mental, you see. So that's how you can heal with your mind. You heal with your mind because you use your mind to focus on a future probability of wellness, okay? And you were doing that with her. Your mind was focusing on her getting better, her getting over it, her feeling better. So you were raising the probability of her getting over it. And as you worked with her and she started to relax some, and then she connected with this higher thing, you see, then she started to get a little attitude of, well, maybe this higher thing will fix me. Well, that little positive attitude then helped her put probability into a positive outcome. You see, so all these metaphors kind of helped, and they all worked together. And then she saw that this was all attributed to this insignificant event in her life, and poof, all the house of cards that she built up in the fear just kind of fell apart. And yes, you can get these things. And when you go to the past, like you say, sometimes you go to the past to fix the problem, and then the problem will fix in the future. Well, that's just a method, a way, it's a tool that you use for helping you focus on a better outcome and a change in the present. So you're using your intent to say, you know, better health. We want this to go away. We want the future to not have this problem in it. Well, you can do that several ways. You could just start with just that, or you can say, well, I'm going to heal it in the past and that'll fix it in the future. That's just a way of you focusing your mind on that outcome. And when you focus your mind on that outcome,
it helps my brain to believe it, eh?
Yeah, right.
It just helps me to believe it.
Yes, it helps you to focus on it, and you need to focus on it from a being level, not from your intellect. You have to really feel it. It has to come out of your being. And it's just a tool you use, and when you use that tool, it works. You see, other people use different tools. Some people say, well, I'm just a little person, I can't heal anything, but I've got powerful friends in the non-physical, and, you know, I've got, Archangel Gabriel, he comes and he heals people when I point them out to him, and then he heals them because I'm small. Well, that's just another tool for overcoming that you feel inadequate yourself, but you still want the future event to change, the future to be without the illness, and it's just another tool you're using to get over a fear that you've got. So there's all kinds of tools that you can have to heal, and the one you're talking about is very effective. It works quite well, and as long as it helps you focus your intent on a positive outcome, then you're modifying that future probability. Now, everybody can't do that as well as anybody else because a couple of things. One, you have to be able to quiet your mind, get all the noise out of your mind. Well, you learn to do that when you meditate. You have to work from your being level, not from your intellectual level. And that's a little harder, but you learn that through practice.
Oh,
right.
You drop out again now? Yes?
Yeah, you were frozen a little. You were frozen
yeah,
a little bit.
You too, yes. Now it's okay. Yeah. For me. Yeah. So you were saying that we have to act from being, from the part of being, and not from the intellect.
Yeah, you have to work from your being level. You have to be authentic. You have to, do this out of your, people would say out of your heart. It has to come from heart energy. Well, that's just another way of saying out of your being level. Your being level is who and what you really are. It's the core of you. Your intellect is often controlled by your fear and your ego and your beliefs. So the intellect is not a strong player here. So it's not a matter of making a wish. That's not what changed future probability. You have to get rid of that mental space, get into a being level space. That's what changes future probability. And that's, for the most part, that's an easier thing for ladies to do than it is for men to do. The ladies are more able to operate out of their being level, and males tend to operate more out of their intellectual level. It's just kind of the way we have evolved to be. So it's not surprising that it's easy for you to do that. Plus, you've been meditating, you've been in this for a long time, and the practice helps you move it down to the being level. That's why when you do these things, you have to get in that quiet space where you kind of let go of the physical and let go of everything else except, just what you're focused on. And all of that comes from the heart or from the being level, and then you're effective. So that's how that works. So you were helping her. She was helping herself with their attitude change. You were helping her with your intent. Plus, she could hang her problem on this insignificant event when she was a child, and that solved her fear problem about feeling inadequate and feeling that, she's failed and she can't do anything right and her body doesn't work and all this other stuff that was all piling up on her, and it just all went away in a flash. So that's how that works. And then they don't find any virus anymore because the body didn't have to create that anymore, or the data didn't have to create that anymore to support the physical process. So that's why it works that way. Yeah, it's a virtual reality, and it's just amazing the way it works and the things that we can do with it here.
Yes, and it's amazing, your explanation. I like it, but then it doesn't exist higher self.
Yes, the higher self. These are all metaphors. The higher self is a metaphor, okay, and that metaphor, I'd say, is probably equivalent to the individuated unit of consciousness as your higher self, because you're the free will awareness unit, which is a piece of that individuated unit of consciousness. So you can say your higher self is that. You could also say that your soul is that, the individuated unit of consciousness is your soul. These are all metaphors. We make metaphors up to help us be able to talk about these things. We make stuff up. All in my theory, they're all metaphors. The larger consciousness system is a metaphor. The fact that it's a digital information system, that's a metaphor. And IUOC, individual unit of consciousness, it's a metaphor. They're all metaphors. And what I did is I went through this derivation logically, and here's a logical step. And in order to talk about that logical step, I need to name it. I need to name it. I need to say what its logical function is, and so on. And then that becomes a thing. So we have to be careful not to believe in these things in the sense that they are solid, fixed things. They're conceptual things. They're metaphors. Just like healing in the past in order to heal in the present. It's a metaphor. It's a way that you use to focus your intent on modifying future probability. So yeah, you can say a higher self. Okay, that's a metaphor. What does that mean? Well, that's your consciousness that is beyond just what your intellect is aware of. Well, okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
That exists. So you can call it. So you can call that a higher self, right? Because there's a whole lot of your consciousness in that individuated unit of consciousness that is not just evolved is not logged on to the virtual reality. So yes, these are metaphors that we need, that form it gives us a way to talk about these things, but we don't take them too literally. We just understand they are metaphors.
Yes. So that part of us, I mean, let's say that I have here how much percent consciousness, I don't know, from the bigger one, you know, if all my consciousness and here in virtual reality and outside the virtual reality is 100% altogether, how much I could use here, like 20% or maybe less?
Probably
much less.
Well, I don't know. We're talking about metaphors. When you're an individuated unit of consciousness, you just take a subset, just a piece of yourself, whether it's 10% or 20%, really doesn't matter. You take some piece of yourself and you let that piece, like you partition it off. You know how we partition off memory in a computer. We partition that off, and then we let that log on to this game, to an avatar, to be a human being, to make the decisions for an avatar. So your higher self then is the rest of that IUOC, if you want to.
Exactly, that's what I want to ask. That's why I want to put numbers. The other rest, the higher self, let's say, helps us. The other part sees us in a monitor, how we move, what we do.
Yes. Now there's this. Now because it's metaphorical, we can also broaden that metaphor. We are a part of this larger consciousness system, right? We're just a piece of it. So part of our higher self may be also a piece of the larger consciousness system. See, we're just pieces of it. And we're not like pieces that are entirely broken off and separated from it. We're just pieces. We're expressions of it. You could say it that way. We're an expression of the larger consciousness system. So when we interact with things, our intuition, you know, you were kind of going to where you have this intuition, you make connections, you see things, you understand things more than what you can see, hear, smell, and touch. You get information that's beyond that. You know, it's called paranormal information, beyond the normal. But that paranormal stuff's really just normal. It's just normal way consciousness works. So as you grow up, as you lower your entropy, all of your access to these other things, to the information in the databases, to understanding where people are coming from, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, you can even taste what they're chewing if you want to tune into that. You know, they can you can taste the food they're eating. You can get this data, this information that helps you be more effective in helping, more effective in your giving, more effective in your becoming love. And all that just becomes a natural part of your life. So it's not so much that you have to be here in a meditation state. You know, you can meditate and go there, or you're here awake in this physical reality, and those are two separate things. It becomes just all one thing, which is kind of what you're talking about. Your life becomes a meditation. You don't really have to sit down and meditate anymore because you're always in a meditation. And as you need data that comes out of these databases, it's just there. As you need to understand somebody and what they need to do and where they need to go, just like you're talking about with this girl. Why is it that you decided that with this girl at this time, you would get her in a theta state, you would regret, you would find out, take her to something that happened in her life? Well, that just came to you. That would be the thing to do.
That came because I wanted so much to get her out of panic attack, because I had panic attacks and I know the feeling, and I didn't want her to have that feeling. Right. So, you know, I want her to take her out. Yeah. It comes. It came to me.
Yeah, it just comes to you out of your intuition. So your intuition is the communication line, okay, to the non-physical, if you like. It's your intuition part that's getting data out of databases, that's seeing things, looking into the probable future of what's likely to happen, you know, if you do various things. So you just get all this information. So intuition's your data connection to the larger system. You can think of it like that. So that's how you know to do these things, because it just comes to you that would be a good thing to do. So as we grow up, our intuition becomes a bigger part of our life rather than something we tap into now and again when we go into a meditation state. It's something we live. We live more intuitively. We become very right-brained and holistic and very left-brained and analytical all at the same time. We don't have to switch one off to get the other one turned on. We're just there. So you meet somebody and you not only get all the physical data that your senses pick up, but you get another whole bunch of data that doesn't have anything to do with your physical senses at the same time. And you just live in a bigger reality. So that's the way that works. And you're aware of more things. You have a bigger decision space, more choices. And as long as you use all that for good reasons, for ways to help people, ways to be of service, then it just keeps growing and getting bigger, and you have more power, if you will. But it's not a power that you will abuse. It's a power that you use in order to help, in order to heal, to make people better. So that means it's a low entropy thing, which means you're evolving with it, which means you'll get more of it. As soon as you use it to take advantage of someone, now you go the other way. That's de-evolving, and you'll end up with less of it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's great, really. Yes, we have to go for now, and thank you very much, Dr. Campbell. And I hope you will have you again with us. Thank you for all this information. It was wonderful.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.